So, we are here today on yet another webinar at the Widen platform, which is teaching you about one more technical topic. We're doing a series of technical topics, and of course, based on your suggestions, we will do some practice management related topics as well, if that's what you like. So, today we are here with a very special speaker. It's always been our intention to get you some of the most experienced speakers in the field. The unique thing always will be that they will be women speakers, and you can get to know a lot about the kind of technology they practice, but also take a page from their books in terms of how they started practice and how they manage the work life balance of being a woman professional at work. So today's topic, I think most of you are really interested in, and that's why we have such so many registrations today. It's called bonded porcelain restorations. And while we all practice some form of this, it's definitely important to get into the nuances and the technicalities of this topic. And I'm especially excited for this one because Dr. Shell Jaggi is somebody who's known for sharing a lot of clinical cases through her vast experience of over 25 years. So, without further ado, as we wait for other people to join in as well, I'm going to introduce her formally on this platform. I think some of you must have seen our live as well. So, you all have some familiarity with her and her journey in dentistry. But let me take you through it for all the ones who are new and joining us now. Dr. Shail Jaggi is practices in Pune and is a certified microendodontist. She has a specialization in endodontics, aesthetic, and restorative dentistry. She's also a Nobel Fellow by Nobel Biocare Implant Systems and has undergone extensive training in one of the most specialized fields of dental operating microscope. She has even trained for advanced endodontic procedures such as instrument retrieval by Dr. Yoshi Terayuchi. She's also a certified practitioner of DSD, Digital Smile Design. I think many of you have heard of it, with Dr. Christian Coachman. Dr. Jaggi is famously known to be a board member and the ex-president of the IAACD. She has a dedicated specialty practice, as I mentioned in Pune. It's called Dental Wiz, where she specializes in advanced endodontic and restorative protocols, but she also practices implant surgical procedures. So she devotes most of her time practicing advanced endodontics, reconstruction of badly broken down teeth, advanced restorative procedures, cosmetic dentistry, and that's why we have her talking about this specific topic with us today. She has been the recipient of many awards, needless to say, in this amazing, illustrious career. She has been the Outstanding Dentist of the Year at FamDent, and her practice has also been the Aesthetic Practice of the Year at the same forum. She, ha- she has a great passion for dental operating microscope, which she has actually integrated into her daily practice, but she also holds courses and teaches young dentists about this specialized field. And of course, she's been using it as a teaching aid so that many more of us learn the importance of using a dental operating microscope in our practice. She has also been a speaker and is a key opinion leader for Colteen as well as 3M. And this keeps her inspired to train and teach younger dentists as she is here with us today. So, without further ado, let me share the screen with her and let me introduce her to our amazing platform, to all you amazing people who are spending this Sunday morning with us here today. Welcome, Dr. Jaggi.
Thanks so much, Diksha. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I'm happy to share this with everybody who's watching us today. So
Lovely.
it's going to be fun. And like before we start, I have to mention this is like a hugely vast topic. We normally do like a 5-day program on this kind of stuff. And putting everything together in 1 hour is going to be really tough.
It's a challenge. Yeah.
I'm giving everybody an overview as to why they need to change, why the thought process needs to change. And I'm hoping by the end of this lecture or this discussion, most of the people are convinced that yes, we need to shift to bonded dentistry. And if that happens, then it's a win-win situation. There's going to be nothing better than that.
That's superb. And that's why I encourage each and every one of you here today to make sure that you're asking your questions in the chat box, because that's the whole aspect of learning that we want to explore. And we are going to have an extensive Q&A session once Doctor has finished presenting her entire seminar. Right? So with that, please take it away.
Am I good to start?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we can see your screen. Perfect.
Give me a second. I'm just going to get these.
Yeah.
Good. So I'm good to start. And hi, morning, everybody. And thank you for making the time to come in and spend this time here. I'm hoping I'm able to change a little bit of your thought process with whatever we're going to discuss today. It's a huge, extensive topic, and it needs a lot of guidelines. So I've tried to put stuff in together, which I think should help you decide whether you want to go ahead with something like this or not. And with that, let's start. So minimally invasive indirect bonded restorations. Now, let's start with what is minimally invasive dentistry. So, minimally invasive dentistry is the application of a systematic respect for the original tissue. And minimally invasive dentistry is a concept that can embrace all aspects of the profession, the common delineator being tissue preservation, preferably by preventing disease from occurring and intercepting its progress, but also by removing and replacing it with as little tissue loss as possible. Now, to tell you in really short, I have been doing a lot of biomimetic dentistry for a long time now. And what I mean by biomimetic dentistry is we are basically preserving every little bit of tooth structure that we have and trying to save it and then go ahead and restore the tooth. Where effectively what I mean here is if I'm going to have to do a crown preparation, I'm taking away a lot of healthy tooth structure when I do a crown prep. So in that situation, I would want to shift to something like this, which is minimally invasive, which is predictable, which is repairable, which is easily doable, and it works wonders. So how is indirect bonded dentistry different from direct bonded dentistry? So if you're doing indirect bonded dentistry and direct bonded dentistry, what's the difference? So both procedures will involve principles and protocols of adhesive dentistry. So let's also understand here that your fundamentals about adhesive dentistry have to be super, super, super clear. When you're doing adhesive dentistry is not just about taking an etchant, putting it on your tooth, washing it off, putting a bond, and then shoving some composite in. That's not adhesive dentistry. Today, we are talking about adhesive dentistry that has, I mean, there's been a huge progress by leaps and bounds in the kind of adhesive dentistry we do today. And those protocols, when you start doing direct or indirect, even those protocols need to change completely. Again, I'm not going to discuss that today because that's a huge, extensive two-day topic. But I'm going to run through a lot of things here, which will help you change your perspective to adhesive dentistry, to bonded dentistry, and a lot of other things. So indirect restorations are typically a two-step procedure. The chairside time is shorter. When I say chairside time is shorter is because when I'm doing a direct composite restoration versus doing an indirect bonded restoration, uh, I have to sit, and even if it's an MOD, I'm spending like an hour and a half just building the tooth up. But if it's an indirect bonded restoration, I'm quickly prepping the tooth. I'm doing my impression, that I'm letting the patient go. Patient comes in again on another day, and then we bond it in and we're done. So typically chairside time is shorter. Operator fatigue is low and higher precision in developing anatomy, contacts, and contours. All of us have experienced this. When you're doing direct restorations, it takes you a long, long time to do an absolutely non-invasive, non-contaminated, bonded restoration, which is direct. As against an indirect, everything happens outside the mouth. So think about the degree of precision you have when you're working outside the mouth. You have a model, you're getting perfect contacts, you're getting perfect, the color is perfect, the shape is perfect, the shade is perfect. If you think something's not right, you can redo it, and you can do all of this so again, your lab will do this for you, but there are also ways where you can do it directly in your office, and that just works so beautifully. Better long-term stability, because like I said, you're working in a totally non-contaminated field, so you are going to have less fatigue and better long-term stability. Okay. So what is indirect bonded dentistry? Indirect bonded restorations are restorations that are fabricated outside the mouth by the lab. Now, also let me tell you here, we also do some indirect bonded restorations in office. So we call these semi-indirect bonded restorations. Now, for example, if you have a situation where you've got a really deep class 2 or you've got a really extensive MOD and you've been putting all your bands in place and your contours and your matrices and everything that you use, even after doing all of that, you're not getting the perfect contour or you're not getting the perfect shape or you're not getting the desired isolation. Then what you can do, or what we do a lot of times to hasten or quicken the process, is we prep the whole tooth. We do a quick impression of the patient. It could just be a single large impression, and we let the patient wait in the waiting room for about 15 or 20 minutes. In the meanwhile, we have something called a silicone dye, where we're just injecting the composite, building it. We can use the composite, build up that whole tooth extraorally outside the mouth. And once everything's ready, we call the patient in again and we isolate the tooth, etch, bond, and just put the restoration in place. So this is a semi-indirect restoration because you're not completely doing it. It's a partial inside the mouth and partial outside the mouth where you're doing it in-house in your office. So that's another great way to do this. So indirect bonded restorations are restorations that are fabricated outside the mouth by the lab. More importantly, these are bonded to the tooth with steps which involve etching, priming, and adhesion dentistry. And the most important thing for any kind of bonded dentistry, whether it's direct or indirect, is the presence of adequate enamel, being the prime requisite for the restorations to qualify as bonded indirect restorations. And these can include things like inlays, onlays, overlays, endocrowns, veneers, tabletops. The list just goes on and on. And you know what? When you are doing a specific crown preparation, think about it. I'm going to show you a couple of slides now where I'll let you know why I don't prefer these full crowns any longer. So most importantly, these are tissue preservative in nature by being minimally invasive. So if you have a patient who comes in with just an occlusal restoration, where if you think it's really huge and you think that you cannot do it directly or you're going to have a huge C factor, there again, things like C factors, adhesion, I'm not going to discuss them in detail today, but all of us know that the C factor is the bonded versus the non-bonded areas of the tooth. So sometimes when you have a really large restoration and you have like a C factor happening there, the patient can end up being super sensitive after the restoration is done. In situations like these bonded restorations are fantastic. Also, if you got an endodontically treated tooth and the patient only had like an occlusal preparation, you can very easily just do like an overlay for this patient in bonded dentistry, and that's fantastic. You don't need to prep the whole crown. If he has a class 2 that he came in with, you only need to replace the class 2 and you're done. So that's what I call being minimally invasive, taking away as little bit of the tooth structure as possible and saving as much as you can. Now the preparation designs can be modified depending on the availability of enamel and the remaining tooth structure available from case to case. So this is another thing. There is no standard procedure or there's no specific design for any of these. You are going to design your own restorations. So this is another huge advantage. You are not forced to take away tooth structure you don't want to take away. If it's looking healthy, if it's nice solid tooth structure, just leave it behind. Again, for these preparation designs, there are guidelines, and these guidelines run into a whole day of discussion. So that's another thing. Retention is fantastic as it depends on the principle of adhesion. Now, when you have a full crown, you're kind of cementing it on with a cement, which means that it may come off at some point, or it may just the cement might just go away. But with these bonded restorations, they're depending totally on adhesion. So you've got some retention, which is absolutely fantastic. Now look at something like this. When I have, this is typically a full crown, but it's a bonded full crown. I'm just showing you here. I don't think most of y'all will be able to identify which tooth the crown was on. But again, this patient, when she came in, the whole tooth was badly damaged and we had to actually give her a full crown. I rarely do full crowns in my office, but this one needed a full crown. But even when I'm doing full crowns, I do prefer bonded dentistry. So if you look at this now, this is what we did for her, that you can see the preparation design. You can see that we've done a minimal preparation, and this is an Emax or a lithium disilicate full crown that we bonded onto the patient. It's the lateral incisor on the left. It's the 1-2 that was bonded. And you can see the kind of aesthetics you get. Again, if I'd done a PFM here, or even if I'd done a zirconia here, I wouldn't have had such fantastic aesthetics, because these aesthetics look brilliant. The thing with lithium disilicate is what I normally use in my office. I'm not a huge user of zirconia because I don't like the opacity of zirconia. I don't like the layering of zirconia. I don't like the basic material zirconia per se, because zirconia is a really hard material. And as time goes by, however good your preparation is or however fantastic it looks, remember, natural dentition ages as time goes by. And zirconia has zero aging. That's why a lot of times go back to your office and look at the zirconia crowns you've given your patients. When you look at those zirconia crowns, you'll see that the crown is perfect. But look at the opposing tooth. You will definitely realize that there's a huge degree of wear happening where the zirconia crown was in contact with the opposing tooth. So that's why I'm not a big fan. There are situations I'll use zirconia, but those are like far and few between. So I'm not like a big zirconia fan. I'm a complete lithium disilicate person, and I think it gives you fantastic bond strengths. It gives you amazing aesthetics, and it's an absolute win-win situation. Now look at this patient. She was a young patient who came in. If you look at the preparation design here, she had some spaces, she had a lot of discolorations and stuff. If you look at these preparation designs, you realize that I am pretty much still in enamel. The design is a very minimal design that I prepared, and you can see the finish lines, you can see the isolation, see the soft tissue orientation. And when you finish with something like this, you patient comes in like this, and the patient goes out like that, and the patient is really happy with the way these crowns look. Or sorry, these veneers look, these aren't crowns, these are just veneers. I'm generally a veneer and a onlay overlay endocrown person. No full crowns in my office. Generally, the percentage of full crowns in my office is just about 1 to 2%, hardly any full crowns at all. So why shift to partial coverage and supragingival bonded dentistry? Which means when I'm saying supragingival bonded dentistry, because most of these margins that I have are supragingival, which means I don't have to work on my soft tissue. I don't have to work on isolation. I don't have to work on retraction. It's such an easy way to do it. So let's look at why. Now, why I don't like full crowns, full coverage crowns. Look at this. They invade the periodontium. We all know what a tough time we have isolating those teeth, right? It's very, very tough. Sometimes there's bleeding, there's oozing, there's contamination. We have a subgingival margin. It's damn tough to work on that periodontium, invade that periodontium. Sometimes we are working like we are very close to the margin of the tooth, and we don't have place for a retraction. So what we're doing is we're actually pushing a retraction cord in. And what you're doing when you're pushing that retraction cord in with a lot of force is you're actually kind of breaking away those fibers from there, the periodontal ligament fibers, and you're actually creating a situation where the patient will end up with either a severe soft tissue irritation because there's no space over there, or the patient is going to end up with a deep pocket there as time goes by. And the initial thing that the patient complains of, they're going to complain of a very itchy kind of a feeling, and they say, okay, the crown is fine, but I've got a very itchy feeling in my gums. And that is something that you need to be really careful about, because the patient typically came in with no pain or problem, but you are sending him back with a periodontal problem. So those are the situations again where why would I want to damage the gum tissue? I would want to preserve it. And the easiest way to do it is with the deep margin elevation. The subgingival margins is equal to poor periodontal health. All of us have done this at some point, try to push the margin as deep subgingivally as possible so we can mask the metal margin. But remember, again, the recession of your soft tissue happens as an age-related procedure also. So at some point, maybe 5 years down the line, maybe 10 years down the line, that black margin is going to show through. So why would you again want to push a margin deep into the soft tissue and invade into that area? Greater chances of gingival irritation and recession, poor pulpal health, invasive preparation design, because when you're cutting for a full crown or prepping for a full crown, you're taking away a lot of healthy tooth structure, greater post-op sensitivity. If you're working on an endodontically treated tooth, that's fine. But if you're working on a vital tooth, all of us had this issue where you put the crown on, patient comes back and say, oh, my tooth is feeling super sensitive. Questionable lifelike restorations, however fantastic your lab is, it's still not going to give you that lifelike appearance. You'll still know that this is like a crown. The need to hide margins subgingivally, and need to repeat the restoration in the aesthetic zone over a period of time due to changes in aesthetics. So these are some of the reasons why I don't like full crown. And question and ease of repairability. When I'm doing something like a bonded restoration, my repairability is much, much higher. So look at this picture here. I've got this off from a textbook, but if you look at what we've done, image number 1, where we just prep for an overlay, okay, you can see I'm far away from the center of the tooth to my pulpal tissue. Look at what happens when I prep for a full crown. I'm actually so close to my pulpal tissue, and I'm actually so close to patient being super sensitive. And look at the third one, that's a comparison. Now this image speaks for itself. After you look at this image, think about it. Do you want to be far away? And look, also look at the first image. Look at where my margins are. They're all supragingival. Do I even need to touch the soft tissue in this case? Not at all. Am I even going to be doing any kind of retraction? I don't need to. But look at the second image. I need to go deep down. I need to push the soft tissue away. I need to make sure I have a complete isolation there. And then I'm doing my impression. And then my impressions, I have drags in my impressions. And then I have an area where I've not recorded my finish lines really well because there's either saliva there, or there's a blood there, or there's fluid there. It's a very difficult situation to deal with these kind of impressions. They're very time consuming. Okay, so why change? Because this adhesive procedure strengthens the cusps and provides additional support for the tooth structure. Its more conservative preparation designs can be utilized. These systems restore mechanical and biological functions while achieving optimal aesthetics with minimal resin cement shrinkage and limited tooth reduction. So this is a win-win situation. It looks good. I'm not biologically damaging the tooth structure. I've got some fantastic aesthetics, and I'm also bonding onto the tooth, which means it's an adhesive bonding. And the second I say it's an adhesive bonding, which means I have a tooth and I'm bonding onto it, and I'm creating one solid structure. With the crown, you have a tooth and you're putting the crown onto it, which means there's a provision for that crown to come off if the fit is poor, if the retention is poor, if there's decay happening under the crown at some point. These are things which are going to interfere with the long-term longevity and success of your restorations. So additional clinical benefits include not only precise marginal integrity, wear resistance that is similar to enamel, and wear compatibility with the opposing natural dentition, but also ideal proximal contacts, excellent anatomical morphology, and optimal aesthetics. So with this, when you put a crown on the tooth, you may have a slight open margin somewhere, and you don't know till you've actually done a radiograph and say, oh, there's an open margin here, I need to repeat this crown. With these kind of restorations, you're bonding onto the tooth surface. So your integration is absolutely picture perfect. It's a fantastic integration. Now, the various methods of post-curing, which could be light, heat, pressure, vacuum, nitrogen, allow for secondary curing of composite by increasing the conversion of the material from monomer to polymer. Now, what I mean over here, we all know that when we do composite restorations or when we do any kind of tooth color restorations, there is a component of polymerization shrinkage. Now, if you have a really large cavity and you're going to restore it, then the larger the cavity, the larger is the component of your composite and the larger is your component of polymerization shrinkage. But look at what we're doing here. You have a tooth, you've prepared the whole restoration outside the mouth. Now, this restoration, bonded restoration, could also be in resin. So today we are talking specifically about ceramic, but we could, if the patient does not have a provision for that kind of a costing, you could very easily do these in resin also. So that's another thing that I do very often, that if the patient can't pay for ceramic or the patient is not comfortable with the costing of ceramics, we very easily do the same thing in resin and it works just as well. So again, when you're doing it outside the mouth, all the polymerization shrinkage, all the stresses have been released outside the mouth. Now you have the restoration, you have the tooth, all you're doing is you're bonding it. And that interface, which is a dual cure resin that you have, is going to have like a really minimal amount of shrinkage. So what you've effectively done is you reduce the polymerization shrinkage. The second your polymerization shrinkage reduces, your longevity of the restoration goes up. The heightened but controlled degree of polymerization increases fracture toughness, flexural and diametral tensile strength, wear resistance, incisal edge strength, and color stability. So again, what I mean by this is if I'm doing most of the procedures extraorally and I'm only using the resin to bond, that's a small component. The complete restoration has better properties, better physical properties, better fracture toughness, everything improves. So when I have so many advantages of doing something like this, why would I even want to go ahead and do something like a full crown where I have to work 3 times harder and have half the predictability? But with something like this, absolutely great predictability. Okay, so now let's come to the point of the decision making point, whether you want to do inlays or you want to do onlays. Now, lithium disilicate, I can do inlays, onlays, anterior, posterior, everything. I'm going to do it step by step. So I'll do a couple of things with you and give you a couple of insights into how you're going to go ahead with this decision making. So the wider the intracoronal damage, the more successful are onlays versus inlays. So what I mean by this is, if you've got a MOD restoration, and if you've got a restoration where the destruction in the center of the tooth, from the center part, from the mesial to the distal, is a huge amount of destruction, and the amount of cusp you have remaining is less than 2.5 millimeters. So you can take a vernier caliper and you can just check the thickness of the cusp remaining. If you have less than 2.5 millimeters of the cusp remaining, then you take away that cusp, because that cusp is not going to be supportive in nature. You take away that cusp and you include it in your preparation design. So that when that happens, you probably will need to or take away some structure that's damaged, or that's not good from a long-term point of view, or which will give way at some point. And once you've done that, you include that little bit of a prep in your preparation. And now, if you've taken away the cusp and included it in your preparation, what you're doing is you're overlaying the two. So instead of an inlay, you're going to have an overlay or an onlay. If you have horizontal cracks in the tooth structure, and if a cusp has visible horizontal cracks, it's best to remove it and include it in the restoration. Now, please remember, a crack in a tooth is like a crack in a glass. It can never be repaired. So if you notice a crack, you do something called chasing the crack. What that means is you're going to take some caries detector or a dye detector, and you're going to start putting it into the fracture line, which you can see. Now, I must also mention over here that when you're doing this kind of dentistry, you definitely need some form of magnification. It could just be loupes, it could be a microscope. We work only with microscopes in my office, but if you're not comfortable getting a microscope right away, you definitely need a pair of loupes, because that's how you're going to see these fine fracture lines and things like that. So you put some dye detector into that fracture line and you leave it for 10 seconds and you wash it off. If you see a thin line that has been kind of stained, then you take the tiniest round burr that you have and you just clean away that fracture line. When you think the discoloration has disappeared, you take your dye detector again and you leave it in again for another 10 seconds and wash it off. Till you see that little fracture line, until you don't eliminate it completely, please get rid of it, because if you do leave that fracture line in there on the tooth, that fracture line is just going to keep advancing as time goes by. And even if you got a restoration that looks fantastic, internally that fracture line might still have a provision to become larger and cause a failure at a later date. So always chase the fracture line, get rid of it, remove it, and then carry on with your restoration. So lack of supporting dentine under the cusp, if you got a really like a huge hollow cusp, then, and it's a completely undermined cusp with just the enamel shell standing, then please get rid of that enamel shell, because you don't want enamel by itself. So this is how the tooth structure is. You got the pulp in the center, then you got enamel, and you got a solid layer of you got the dentine, and you got a solid layer of enamel over it. Now what happens is this enamel is actually holding the whole dentine together. But if this dentine completely becomes hollow, and like a lot of times you see very invasive cavities, and you have only a shell of this enamel remaining, enamel by itself is very brittle. So if it's a very brittle enamel, all you need to do, the second you bite on it, that enamel is going to shatter to pieces. So you do need to get rid of that enamel, restore that bit of tooth structure, and then do your impressions. Okay. So partial coverage bonded overlays for an endodontically treated lower first molar. Look at this here. Now, what I normally use for my preparations is the Diatec inlay preparation kit. This is, if you look at this kit gives you the whole gamut of diamond points and burrs that you need for your preparations. Look at this preparation now. This was an endodontically treated tooth. If you look at what I've done with this tooth, I had a buccal and a lingual wall that was rock solid, that was absolutely perfect. Patient had an MOD cavity. So what we've done is we've just gone ahead and only taken away the unhealthy bit of the tooth. And After the unhealthy bed of the tooth is taken away, the chamber has been filled in with a core buildup material. And after I've done that, I've done my preparation design. So if you look at this, all the internal, ideally, if I were doing a full crown for this, what would I do? I would also take away that buccal and the lingual wall, which means look at the tooth now. The MOD part is already missing. And I would also take away my buccal and my lingual wall. I would actually then be left only with the hollow shell of the tooth. Now, think about this. And somebody asked me the other day how I was want to convince the patient about whether I want to give him full crown or whether I want to give him an orthodontic restoration. Yeah. There, Diksha, there's somebody speaking in the background. Yeah. So if you show this image to a patient also, a patient who's not educated to do dentistry, but a patient who just has basic common sense, when you show him this picture and you tell him that, okay, I've got 2 solid walls left, but if I give you a full crown, I'm going to take away those also, and you're going to be left with very little natural tooth structure, then it's a win-win situation. The patient going to say, okay, let's just do this because I think it's saving my tooth a lot more. So all you're going to do is do your endo, restore your tooth, like do your core buildup. And after you've done your core buildup, this is what you're going to do next. You're just going to prepare a design. Look at this design now. No fracture lines, nice free flowing margins. All the internal angles and edges are rounded to avoid stress and to facilitate the fabrication of the restoration. And look at the isthmus width. It should be at least 2 millimeters with a minimum depth of 1.5 millimeters. Why 2 millimeters and 1.5 millimeters? Because that's the amount of space you need for a lithium disilicate bonded restoration to be strong enough. That's a material property. Your lithium disilicate needs at least 2 millimeters of thickness for it to be a nice solid restoration. Okay, you look at this again. All enamel should be supported by sound, healthy dentine. All undercuts have to be blocked out to preserve tooth structure instead of including them in the preparation. What I mean by that is, if you had an undercut, which means that one part of the DQ was extending deep into the tooth structure, you don't take your whole preparation to that depth, because remember, you want to keep your isthmus width as narrow as possible. Now, let me also tell you that when we are doing MOD restorations, if you have an MOD restoration, then the whole strength of your tooth is going down by 60%. 60% is a huge, which means the chances, 60% is more than half, which means the chances of your failure are higher. So the more tooth structure you preserve, the smaller your isthmus width is, the higher strength your tooth has, and the better your longevity is. So if I had an undercut, I wouldn't extend my preparation all the way to the undercut. I'd fill out that undercut and bring the preparation to be a narrower isthmus width. So that's what I'm looking at. So we're blocking out all the undercuts here. And this is a proximal view, or this is a side view of the same preparation. Can you see the whole preparation? Look at the enamel margins. There are good enamel margins all around. I don't have any sharp edges. Everything's nice and rounded. And when the isthmus preparation exceeds 1/2 of the distance from the central fossa to the cusp tip, a restoration with cuspal coverage should be considered. Now, also remember, if you are doing bonded restorations like after endodontic treatment, all endodontic treatment definitely needs cuspal coverage, because when you do endo for a tooth, a lot of tooth structure is missing. So in that situation, you definitely want to do a full coverage, which means that all my endodontically treated teeth will always be overlays. I will never, unless it's a really solid cusp and it's not directly in my occlusal bite or it's not undermining my tooth, then I might leave the cusp behind. But very often, as a rule, endodontically treated teeth should have full cuspal coverage, which means that they should be overlays. And that's how your overlay looks after you finish with the restoration. This picture has been done with a 20 megapixel camera with a macro lens, which what I'm trying to say here is that I couldn't get any closer in a 3:1 ratio, which means that this is the closest I can get to that image. And when I blow this image up, you will still not be able to see the transition of my restoration from my restoration to my tooth. Just look at the bonding there. I have absolute isolation. I have zero contamination. I have very good bonding, and I have a restoration that fits well. I have a restoration that where there are no leaky margins. I have a restoration where it's an adhesive restoration, which means it's bonded to the tooth and deriving all its strength from the so this restoration is also supporting the tooth to make my tooth stronger, but it's also deriving all its strength from my existing tooth structure. So which means it's a win-win situation, and together as a unit, this restoration is not likely to fail in the near future for a very long time. Plus, look at I didn't have to do any retraction here. If you look at this image here, can you see all the margins are supragingival? Look at this. Everything is supragingival. I only had to retract my dam over it, and there is no retraction cord or anything else over there. So can you see how easy this is, how much time I save over here? This preparation design, how difficult does it look? It doesn't look very difficult. All I need is inlay preparation. I need an inlay preparation kit. If you look closely at this thing, at this picture here, look at it's been etched. Can you see those frosty white margins? And those frosty white margins are all around the periphery of the tooth. This is what we call a peripheral seal of an enamel biorim. Now, peripheral seal, enamel biorim, I do not have the time to go into those details today, but I can definitely do another program for you guys to get you to understand this is the future of biomimetic dentistry. This is the new adhesive dentistry that we're talking about. So if you see that solid enamel margin all around, that's called an enamel biorim. If you look at the solid enamel margin all around, that's called an enamel peripheral seal. If you look at the structure of my preparation, this is called preserving the theory of the biodome. The biodome theory means you preserve as much tooth structure as you can above the contact point of the tooth, or where you have the bulge of the tooth that's going down. If all your preparations are above the bulge of the tooth, then you're preserving the biodome. This is called preservation of the biodome. Now, today we don't have the time to do this, but we can definitely discuss it on another day. So these are your preparation designs, and this is how you finish. Looks super, very strong. It will not give way under any kind of loading or anything, and it works just as well or maybe even better than a full crown. So easy to clean, finish and polish, flared proximal margins. So if you see that now, when I'm looking at it from the proximal view, you can see there's just a little bit of a dual cure resin there, and I've just got to put my floss through it, clean it out, and I'm done. So inlays, onlays, endocrowns, or tabletops, what's your choice going to be? Highly discolored cusps in the aesthetically important areas. Now, for aesthetic reasons, such cusps should be covered with the veneer portion of the restoration or removed. Now, this is something which is like an overlay. I'll show you some images a little later. If the patient has aggressive eating of hard foods, many patients eat especially tough or hard foods such as hard candy, nuts, or ice. Consider placing an onlay with its superior strength instead of leaving questionable cusp behind. That's going to be a deciding factor. Also, let me just bring to your notice whether the patient is a bruxer or the patient has a severe clenching habit, then it's not a good idea to do bonded restoration for that kind of patient, because they will wear away the restorations, or whether they may have a potential to fracture those restorations. Because I have bruxers where I've seen them even wear away the metal of a metal ceramic crown. So please identify these patients, and these patients need a slightly different protocol. Don't go ahead with bonded restorations. Now look at premolar. This is a premolar onlay dealing with tensile stresses. This patient came in. You can see that it's a lower premolar. It was in her smile line, and you can see it's discolored. So her preparation design was slightly different. Now look at the preparation design here. It looks like a relatively flat preparation design, which means that you'll wonder, oh, if I'm going to do a full crown on this, my full crown is not going to stay for a day, even a day. But look at something like this. Even when I have a structure like this, my bonded restoration is still going to stay, because my bonded restoration is not deriving retention from the height of the tooth. My bonded restoration is not deriving anything from the existing tooth structure. My bonded restoration is an independent entity that will stay on whatever tooth structure I make it stay, because I am completely relying on adhesive dentistry. Now, when I'm doing adhesive dentistry, a lot of people might question and say that, oh, but this is all dentine. This is completely in dentine. So how are you going to do adhesive dentistry? Because dentine bonding doesn't work as well as enamel bonding. But I have to bring to your notice here that the latest research now says that dentine bonding strengths can be 400 times stronger than enamel bonding strengths if they're done right. And if they're done right, the most important thing here is if they're done right. There are specific protocols that we need to follow. things like immediate dentin sealing that we're talking about, if you do things like these, isolation, immediate dental sealing, peripheral enamel seal, preserving the biodome, then you're looking at some fantastic bond strength. 400% increase in bond strength. 400% is a huge variable. And when you're looking at that kind of a bond strength on dentine, like I said, you'd never want to do anything else. It's just so simple to do this. Even for this restoration, if you look at this, you'll see the margins are relatively supragingival. I've not had to really go down. The only margin that is looking slightly equigingival is my buccal margin, because that's the margin I want to completely flush my restoration with. Okay, so this is an aerial view of the whole restoration again. The most important thing I need you to notice here is, though we've done a lot of dentine, but look at the periphery of this preparation. We have still maintained the enamel peripheral seal. I still have a lot of enamel for bonding. The remaining bond strength is going to come from my dentine bonding, where I'm going to work up on an immediate dental sealing, and I'm going to increase those bond strengths to a very, very high value. And this is how we finish with this restoration. So if you look at this, it looks absolutely perfect. What am I depending on? Totally on bonding. What is my material of choice? Lithium disilicate. Look at the aesthetics, look at the finish. If I had just shown you this, probably you won't even realize that this is just a restoration. Okay. So now, heavy occlusion in case of bruxism or clenching and in the presence of questionable cast, preferably onlays or full crowns. Teeth with short clinical crowns, and again I'll show you some pictures again with teeth with short clinical crowns, and you will identify that a lot of us would have had this problem at least once in our life. So teeth with short clinical crowns, retention of an onlay would be questionable. So either inlays or endocrowns are preferable for full mouth rehabilitation cases where a patient has worn down dentition. Look at this. This is an endocrine. Now, if you look at this structure here, you can see, and this is typically something you'll see in your last molars, like a 4-7 or a 1-7, where you have such short clinical heights that by the time you prep those clinical heights for a full crown, you have no tooth structure left. So in that case, how are you going to do this? What you'll do is you'll work reverse. You already got an endodontically treated tooth. You don't have a high clinical height, but you do have height in the chamber. So what we're going to do is we're going to take retention from the chamber that you've already prepped because of your endodontic treatment. And once you've done that, you don't need clinical height buccally, but you've got a lot of clinical height inside the chamber. And that's how you're going to do your preparation design. Look at this now. This is a short clinical crown for an endodontically treated molar. This was a patient we treated. And do you think there was any chance of putting a full crown on this tooth? Absolutely not. So what we do instead is we go into the chamber, endo's already been done, block out all the undercuts, do like a basic core build up. And if you have like a tapering margin, just make sure that your margins are occlusally diverging margins. And once you have that occlusally diverging margins by blocking out the undercut with the composite restoration, look at that. What we've done here is just gone ahead, made an impression, and that's how the lab sends the crown back. And this is a trial fit for the same crown. And look at that. Notice the seamless margins, the perfect fit and solid tooth structure. I didn't need to prep the tooth. I didn't need to do osseous recontouring. I didn't need to do a clinical elevation. All I did was take support from the internal structure of my tooth. But what I definitely need to know is how my adhesion is going to work, what is my preparation design going to be, and how I'm going to do the bonding. So this is something you need to look at. And look at this. This is an absolute win-win situation. This is in close-up. Can you even make out that there's a bonded only on that? So if you have short clinical crowns, then endo crowns is the way ahead. That's the only thing you should be doing. I don't think you should even get, because if you don't do anything, then the chances of that tooth fracturing and the patient coming back with a fractured tooth is very high. So you do need some kind of a prosthetic rehabilitation, and endo crowns are your best bet. Look at that. This is an occlusal check. You can see everything's perfectly fine. Even in this close-up, you can hardly make out the transition of the margin between the tooth and the height of your natural tooth. So tabletops, now these are your best options when you want to achieve minimally invasive full mouth rehabilitation. Now, a lot of times when you're doing a full mouth rehab, I've typically seen cases where the patient's been advised to get endo done. So when are you going to do a full mouth rehab? When you got like really short clinical crowns. So I have patients who've come in where all the teeth have been prepped, all the teeth have been endodontically treated, and then they've been giving. So this is a horrible situation because you gone and done endo for all the teeth. You've gone and taken away the proprioception or natural proprioception for the patient, and then you've just given a lot of full crowns to the patient. As against that, if you just do a phase board transfer, now what you need to do is you're going to raise the bite, right? So if you're going to raise a bite, then you have 2 millimeters of raising bite on the lower arch and 2 millimeters of raising bite on the upper arch. Let's start with the base of 2 millimeters. It could be even more. But if you're only going to be needing 2 millimeters of bite raise, then that 2 millimeters is what you need for your ceramic onlays. So instead of cutting the whole tooth, you trust adhesive dentistry, get an onlay made and just bond it onto this tooth. And that's a win-win situation because then you don't need to do endo, you don't need to prep, you don't need to do anything. You just take 2 millimeters of bonded onlays and you bond them to all your teeth, lowers, bond them to all your upper teeth, and you're done. So that's how you do your full mouth rehabilitation. So this is what I'm talking about. These tabletops only need a increase in height. If you have this kind of, if your basic preparation of your tooth looks like that, which is just a basic preparation where you take off all the rough edges, you take off all the undercuts and just seal them up with immediate dentin sealing and smoothen out your margins. You got, remember, look at any of your full mouth cases. You'll always see that the worn out tooth has a fantastic enamel margin all around it. Use that enamel margin, do bonded dentistry, and just bond on your onlays, and you're done. So look at this case now. You can see there is a lot of fracture lines there. Some of these teeth needed crowns because the fracture lines were very, very deep and extensive. But even look at those teeth, even for those, we just did immediate dentin sealing and we put crowns and onlays on. And this is how we finish with this case. Bonded onlays, some crowns, a lot of bonded onlays, veneers for the front teeth. This was in 2016. This is a follow-up in 2017, you can see. Okay, still looks very good. There's no failure anywhere. 2018, still looking very good. Again, there is hardly any failure except for patient was a pan chewer and he was into a little bit of tobacco. So those are the only stains you can see. 2019, and again you can see that there's hardly any damage to the whole occlusion, and everything we've done is totally stable. Bonded dentistry works, it definitely does. And once 2019, and then after that we haven't seen him because of the pandemic, but when I see him again, I mean, I'm sure the occlusion is going to be as stable as this. So let's look at the onlays, overlays, tabletop bonding protocols. Now, if failure has to happen, the most common situation where failure happens is the bonding protocols. So if you have a situation like these, now these are all vital teeth except for the 2-3. The 2-3 needs endodontic treatment, so we've just left that. But the 2-4, 2-5, and 2-6 are all natural teeth. They are all, this was a full mouth rehab case incidentally. So you can see what we've done is just taken away all the restorations, take the old restorations, prep the teeth. Wherever we've had undercuts, just blocked out those undercuts, put in a layer of bonded restoration there, which is like an immediate dentin sealing that we're doing. The details of the immediate dental sealing and all the protocols and everything, again, I'm not going to discuss it today, maybe another day. And this is a basic prep design. When you look at the prep design, again, you can see that even from the occlusal view, you can see that I have a lot of solid enamel all around. The dentine strength I'm getting from the immediate dentin sealing, and that's how I've gone ahead and done this. So when you're doing a dual cure bonding, this involves two parallel protocols. Your tooth needs to be worked on and your restoration needs to be worked on, and they both need to be done parallelly. So how are you going to do that? You condition the prepared tooth surface with phosphoric acid and a bond application, conditioning the prosthesis with hydrofluoric acid and silination, and injecting the dual cure resin into the conditioned prosthesis and bonding. Light cure the dual cure resin after seating it accurately. So just let's look at it. So that's your first step. Pre-op, after the prepping, then we're just sandblasting to take away all the biofilms and everything on the tooth just before I bond, etching it. Here you can see the etched enamel biorim under isolation. And this is another thing you'll notice with all the work that we do clinically. No work happens without absolute isolation. This is what I even mentioned the other day when we were discussing the preview to this lecture, that if you isolation is a problem, then get to a good mentor and start learning. And even after you've done that, practice is a big thing. Start practicing on your assistants, start practicing on your associates, because when you practice, then everything like this, you might think this is very complex. But an isolation like this doesn't take me more than 3 or 4 minutes, and it's very simple to do it. So the enamel biorim under isolation for perfect bonding. And this, if you can see what we've done on the model, we made a putty index and put the putty index on the onlays on the model, and we just picked it up. Why we done this? Because it's just very easy for me to hold it like this and see what I'm doing. Hydrofluoric acid for etching and washing everything off. So I don't have to take one thing at a time and keep doing it. I hold all of it together, etch together. Also, very importantly, what I'm doing is all the surfaces of the tooth that are the natural surfaces, or the lithium disilicate on the outside, is not being etched by the hydrofluoric acid. It's protected by my putty. So you can see that once you've etched the surfaces, you wash it off, and again, that's silane. You're silinating the surfaces. Now, after this step is done, leave it aside to air dry. Now it's ready to bond, and my preferred bonding is either paracord from Poltene, or I also use a lot of Benevia for my bonding. So these are my two go-to things, golden standards for bonding in adhesive industry. Now I've taken, you can see there are two bottles over here, primer A and primer B, and on the right is the dual core syringe. So I take the primer A and primer B, mix it together, and apply it to the tooth surface. You can see it's got a nice shiny surface now. I'm loading the dual cure resin into my onlay, and now I'm starting to bond. I'm bonding all three together. I'm starting from the last tooth and coming to the front. Now, will it set quickly? No, because Paracord gives me, it's a slow setting dual cure resin. It gives me very good setting time. I have a working time of about 5 to 7 minutes before it sets completely. So I'm putting my onlay onto the last tooth. I'm putting it onto my second last tooth, and then I'm coming to the first tooth. And then before I cure it, what I do is I just take a floss and I go through the interproximal area and I clear out the excess resin over there. And then I'm ready. So again, the other rule of doing biomimetic dentistry is whenever you're using a dual cure resin, please don't cure immediately. Wait for 2 or 3 minutes and let the first natural curing, which means the natural setting reaction, happen on its own without a light. So dual cure means it cures with a light and it cures chemically. So the rule is let the chemical cure happen for 3 or 4 minutes and then you light cure it. So that is again going to help you increase the bond strength. It's going to reduce the polymerization shrinkage, and it's going to work well. So these fundamentals of biomimetic dentistry, the steps to biomimetic dentistry, the ways we can increase the bond strength, these are all things that I will probably do in another lecture at some point. But these are things you need to start focusing on if you want the bond strength to increase by 400%. Okay, so there I'm going interdentally. You can see I'm just cleaning out with the floss. And once I clean it out, then I'm going to wait for a basic cure to happen. The dual cure will set by itself, and then to enhance it, I'm going to do a light curing. So there I'm light curing it, you can see. And this is a perfectly flush margins, great blending, and super shade matching. So this is, you're seeing it in close up, all the onlays that are bonded. This is how they look with the dam, after the bonding, without the dam. And interproximally, you can see there's absolutely no resin, no, a lot of times you remember when you take out the old crowns, you'll see a lot of soft tissue there is looking very red, very inflamed. There may be some cement that's stuck into the soft tissue. In situation like this, nothing at all, nothing. It's absolutely clean. And something like this, if it even chips or breaks, very easily repairable. So this was about some of the indirect bonded posterior restorations. Let's talk a little about the anterior indirect bonded restorations. The most common ones are the veneers that we do. I mean, you can do full crowns also with lithium disilicate, which is Emax, but I prefer a lot of my practice is just a lot of smile designing and veneers. So look at this patient now. When the patient comes in, she had already had orthodontic treatment. If you look at her two canines, you will see that there are small anchors on the canines. She was an Invisalign patient. Her Invisalign was done by another practice, and then she wanted to come in for some cosmetic work to me. So when she came in, her basic problem was that my teeth have corrected really well, but look at the proportions. My proportions are all wrong. So even after orthodontic treatment, I'm not happy. I'm not confident enough to smile because I don't like the way my teeth are looking. So how do you go about this? Now, when she came in, you can see one advantage that you have here is the teeth, the enamel on the tooth is super, super solid, bulky. What that means is that even if I do preps, I'm practically going to be prepping only in the enamel, which is great because then I'm not touching the dentine at all. And this is how she looked, her smile. This is what it looked like, which she definitely needed corrections in proportion. Now, when we design stuff like this, I use my DSD, the digital smile designing, but again, today is not what we're discussing. That's not what we're discussing. So I'm going to skip all the DSD steps and everything because that's another lecture again, a 2-day lecture. So this is how we had our proportions. Now, after we had done all our DSD and everything and got a proportion sorted, we realized that these proportions were the best proportions for her. This is the same patient. You can see this. She's the same patient here. Sorry. Okay. Look at this bulky teeth. Look at this and this. What we did here was just proportion all her teeth and give her new temporaries. Now, this is something, when we did this, now we did not touch her natural teeth at all. We did not cut any tooth. We did not prep any tooth. Nothing was done. On these natural teeth, we just gave her a new set of temporaries, which helped me decide that, oh, does this proportion look okay? I was pretty happy with the proportion. Patient looked at it and she was very happy with the proportion. And she said, yeah, this is okay. We can go ahead with it. Now, something like this is called a trial smile or a test driving a smile or a mock-up smile. Why do I need something like this? Because when a patient is coming in like this to you, she obviously, one second. Okay, when she's coming in like this to you, she's coming with some huge expectations. And if you say, okay, let me just cut all your teeth and let me just put veneers or crowns on them, and you do all of that, and patients say, yeah, but I don't like this. This is not what I was looking for. How do you decide that this is what the patient needs, or this is what she's looking for? The first thing you can do is a digital simulation directly on your computer. There are a lot of softwares now where you can do digital simulation, and one of the most popular ones is DTS Pro, where we use it for an images simulation. I take one picture of the patient, I put it into my DTS Pro, and immediately I have a before. I run the software, I have a before and after, and I show it to the patient. Patient says, "Oh yeah, this looks very good. Can we do this?" The next step is you want to try it in the patient's mouth because on the screen it may look good, but you don't know how it's looking in the patient's mouth, right? So then the next thing you're going to do is try it in the patient's mouth, and this is how you try it in the patient's mouth. You get your models ready, you get your proportions ready. The lab is going to give you a whole wax up, and you transfer that wax up into the patient's mouth. Again, today no time to show you all those steps in detail, but this is just the sequence of events that I'm discussing with you. Once the patient looks at this, once you do the pictures, and once the patient says, oh, this is looking really nice, now you know that whatever you do for the patient's going to like it, she's going to be happy with it. Then you get on to your prep designs and everything, because once you prep, remember, it's irreversible. You can't go back. And if the patient says, I don't like it, there's very little you can do about that, right? So this is what her temporization look like, and this is what we stabilize. At this point, you make an index of something like this, which the patient is happy with. So you can do your final temporaries like this. And these are your preparation designs. Now I like to follow the Gallup Curel technique for preparation design because it's completely non-invasive. I can work through so these are called a pre-aesthetic temporaries. Pre-aesthetic temporaries means that even before I'm doing the aesthetic work, I've already designed a temporary, or I've already designed a final smile for her without even touching her natural teeth. So pre-aesthetic temporaries. Now I'm working through these pre-aesthetic temporaries and I'm prepping those teeth. Once I've prepped these teeth, look at what happens. I've hardly touched any of your natural tooth. I have very small spots where the dentine's been touched, but practically everything is in my enamel. Look at the soft tissue. Soft tissue looks good. You can see there's no bleeding there. There's no oozing. Nothing's happening. Now these preps are looking decent. And this is what I like to use for my impression technique. If you don't do direct, I mean, if you're not doing this, is called analog dentistry, where what I'm doing is I'm doing impression and stuff. But a lot of times we do digital dentistry, which means that after I've done these preps, I just take my intraoral scanner and I scan all these images. I scan the whole preparation. I have an STL file. I attach it to my email and send it to my lab. The lab just downloads that file and they print out a model of this and they make the veneers. So there's no impression making involved at all. Everything is scanned and digital. So a lot of us still do analog dentistry, but if you got a scanner and you got uh, intraoral scanner and you're doing digital dentistry, then your work time gets cut by half. Why? Because the patient comes in, you prep, you scan, and the work is in the lab. In the next 1 hour after you scan, the lab downloads it and it's with them in an hour. If you're doing analog dentistry, which means the regular impressions, you're doing the impressions, the lab boy comes or you courier it to the lab, that takes a day. They're pouring the model, that takes another day. They're processing the work, that takes another 5 6. So you're looking at about 10 days. You already eliminated 3 or 4 days. And secondly, when you're doing your scanning, if any of those areas are not looking good, or if you get a drag in your impression material, you have to repeat the whole impression. In digital dentistry, if you're getting a drag or a margin is not looking decent enough, or you're not happy with the way it's recorded, all you do is digitally just erase that little bit and rescan that. 2 minutes and you have a brand new impression. So you're typically with digital dentistry, as we go ahead, we are cutting down on time, we are saving on material costs. I mean, the scanner also costs a lot of money, but this is a quicker way to do it. So if you have the provision to get a scanner, then it's a great way to do dentistry. So this is the impression material. Now you can see that the impressions were made and these were new temporaries that were given to the patient just before the patient leaves. Patient comes in and these are her 4 anterior veneers. Now you can see the veneers look good, the fitting is perfect, the soft tissue orientation is beautiful, you don't need anything at all. The only you if you see those 2 canines, you can see that there are still those anchors on the canine. The reason we didn't get those out was because in the interim stage she was still using her retainers and for her Invisalign, so that there was no movement of the teeth. So after we did this, though everything looked so good, patient said, no, I want absolutely white teeth. I don't like those little cervical yellow stains. So that's the reason you will always do a BIS trial. Because if you get a final work from the lab has to undo everything and redo it. But if you're getting a BIS trial, then when the patient says, oh, I don't like the little discoloration there, you just get it changed. And this is how we finished her final work. And you can see that's how we started, that's how we finished. Good proportions, good soft tissue, everything was looking very, very nice. Patient was really happy with the way everything had finished. Now, we haven't done the canines because the patient also said, no, I don't want to do the canines. I only want to do the 4 front teeth. And you can change the color of the canines by just placing. So there are times if I don't need a lot of preparation, I just do a direct bonded restoration on my canines to change the shade of the canine. And that also works really well. So in this case, the patient was absolutely sure that she wanted only the front 4 incisors, the centrals and the laterals. And that's what we did for her. This is in close up. You can see it looks good. I'm totally bonded onto enamel. Wherever I have a little dentine, I've done imagic dentine sealing. And this again is a very strong restoration. I'm not going to have a problem with this. Patient can use these, eat, bite, chew, drink. There's going to be absolutely no problem. And these are her images of her smile. And then she went back to her orthodontist. We've given her a bonded retention. Now from the occlusal surface also, you can see, look at the finish of the veneers. You can see that the veneers are absolutely perfectly flushing in with the natural tooth. I don't have a misfit or an open margin or anything like that, which will lead to failure of those bonded restorations. So look at these, bonding has been done. Indirect retention has been done after her Invisalign. And this is how we finished this case. This is how she looked after she was done, and a very, very happy patient. Okay, so before and after. Another patient here where I showed you this earlier. Those were her proportions. That is how we finished her smile. And this is how veneers are done. Now, I haven't discussed too much of preparation designs. The bonding protocols more or less remain the same like I discussed for the inlays and non-lays. But other than that, nothing much really changes. What is the focus is the focus needs to be on your preparation designs. The focus needs to be on your bonding. Focus needs to be on your isolation. And the focus needs to be on basic principles of adhesive dentistry and basic principles of preparation designs. So when you have failure of bonded restorations, what are the most common causes poor preparation designs. If you don't leave enough space for your bonded restorations, the bonded restoration need a certain thickness. If the thickness is not sufficient, it's obviously going to fracture on a load. So the preparation designs have to be perfect. Your choice of restorative material has to be perfect. Now, if you're doing veneer preparations and you're doing zirconia veneers, then they're never going to last because zirconia doesn't bond. Zirconia is a metal. Zirconia doesn't bond. So I've seen a lot of people doing zirconia inlays and onlays also. Not a very great idea because that's what I call improper choice of restorative material. For bonding, you need a material that bonds 100%. You need a proper bonding material. Lack of isolation, get your game together, invest in good mentoring for learning how to use the rubber dam for isolation. Lack of immediate dentin sealing. If you're not doing immediate dentin sealing, if you're a lot of dentine exposed and you're not doing immediate dentin sealing, then you are going to have poor bond strength. If you're doing great sealing, then you're going to have bond strengths which are as high as 400%. Poor bond strength if you're not doing the right technique, and a bonding technique which is failing, which means so with so many materials in the market today, you may just be overwhelmed with, oh, should I buy this or should I buy this or should I, can the bond be from another company? Can the core be from another company? So my advice would be don't increase your inventory unnecessarily. Invest in one material that you trust, something which you can get easily, something that you can get repeatedly in your office all the time. That you should call your dealer and he should be able to hand it over to you. I think paracord is a fantastic material for bonding of crowns, inlays, onlays, veneers, posts, everything. So once you have this material, you go ahead and become an expert using that material and using that technique. The more you do that technique over and over again, the more predictable it becomes. The more predictable it is, the less failure you have. So don't buy 10 materials and then try everything, because then what you're doing is you have no way of understanding whether this failed or it didn't fail or it worked or it didn't work. When you use the same thing 50 times, you will automatically know what works and what doesn't work. If there is a problem, you know how to work around it, and it's very easy to become an expert at that. So keep your inventory short, keep your inventory specific, and invest in just a single technique over and over again so that you become good with it. And that's the way to improve your reliability with whatever you're doing in your everyday work. So this was about, I think I have a 1 hour slot and we have kind of reached the end of that thing. So I've given you an overview of why I like bonded dentistry. I also have a lot of workshops that happen. So we have these, so again, if you have that's my number, you can WhatsApp me if you've got a question or if you want to ask me something, go ahead, save that number and you can WhatsApp me a question or a query or whatever. We also have I have a study club, so you feel free to join that study club. Again, send me a text saying that you would like to join the study club and I'll put you into it. And if you're looking at understanding how all of this works, I have a workshop coming up. I think it's on the 6th, 7th, 8th of August. Yeah, the 6th, 7th, 8th of August. So feel free to join me for the workshop or ask for details on the same number. And if you can't come and join me physically at my training center, because I have a training center where we do all the hands-on and everything with the participants. If you can't do that, we also have an online module. So I'll be happy to sign you up for the online module. We've been running a lot of these online modules for smile designing and indirect bonded restorations with some fantastic reviews of a lot of participants from all over who've attended from India as well as different countries. So please feel free to sign up for that if you're interested. And I also have a 5-day skill enhancement program, which is happening on the 26th of this month, July, where this is basically for a lot of young dentists or for us specialists who have lost touch with general dentistry because of their specialization. So we do a day of endodontics, we do a day of anterior composites, a day of posterior composites, crown and bridge, post and pole, tooth whitening, and yeah, that's about it. So 5 days of what you need for general dentistry, and that kind of sets you up, and it's a completely hands-on clinically oriented program, so that will set you up for whatever you need for your general dentistry. And we have a full mouth rehab program coming up at the end of August. So if you want details, please write to me and we'll be happy to share the details with you. With that, I'd like to come to an end of this discussion. I hope it's been insightful. I know it may not have given you everything that you wanted, but 1 hour is a really short time to put everything there. But connect with me and maybe we can do another program on something like this at some point. So with that, thanks Diksha for having me over for this presentation. I hope people have enjoyed it. I'd love to hear a feedback of what everybody had to say about this, and I'm open to questions now.
Superb. So I think we did cover a lot in that hour, and especially the parts where they can get in touch with you and dive deeper into this topic, definitely. But what I would want to address is some of the questions that started showing up in the chat box because everyone's been paying, rapt attention to the program. I would still encourage everyone to continue to post questions as we enter into our Q&A session. Thank you, Doctor. It's been a very, very informative and comprehensive presentation as expected. You have also covered a lot of clinical aspects, which was what was the requirement of the day today. Let me start by a question by Dr. Bhavani, who says, what is the cost difference between a full crown and an inlay and overlay?
So, Bhavani, it also depends on what lab you're working with, because the lab I send my work to. So my lab. So again, that day I discussed about labs. So I think Katara Dental in Pune. They have a branch in Pune, Bangalore, and Bombay, if I'm not mistaken. They are one of the best labs in the country, and that's where my work has been going for the last 25 years. But
Right.
yeah, the differential in costing I think would be almost double, because if my lab charges me 1,200 bucks for a metal ceramic crown, then this restoration costs about, I think, approximately 3,500 bucks lab cost. But also remember that these are not low end restorations, or they are not low end things that you're doing for your office. If you're doing these, then you are giving the patient a very high value product, so you can charge more. And if the patient is not willing to pay for something like this, then please go ahead and do the same thing in resin, which will be similar to the cost of your metal ceramic crown. So whether you do a metal ceramic crown or you do a bonded overlay onlay in resin, the costing will be the same. And the protocols will be exactly what I've discussed today. So you're still saving a lot of tooth structure, only the material changes, and that you have to inform the patient, which is the way it works.
Right. That brings me to the next question, Doctor, that if you're talking about indirect resins, can you name some of the popular ones that you have been using?
So again, I mean, I didn't show you a case of a semi-indirect restoration today, but
Yeah.
semi-indirect, then you don't need to pick a special product or anything. Use the composite that you use in your everyday life. Whatever you're
Mhm.
using for your everyday, use that. And at the end, if you have the time and the patient is going to come back another day, what you can do is just take that, put it into a pouch and put it into your autoclave. Because when you put it into the autoclave under high pressure and with the heat conversion, that composite also becomes much stronger. But if you're just sending it to your lab, then the lab will have something like Adoro, or they have a lot of these products which are resin-based products. Um, Coltine has something called, you have the, Coltine has
I
something,
think Shofu has of
yeah, all of these have. But then if you're sending it to the lab, then the lab will use whatever they have. But if you're doing
right,
it in-house, then you just use your regular composite and it's fine.
right, and the regular composite would require an indirect technique, which of course we can get into sometime in the future. Right. Great. So I think, Dr. Bhavani, hopefully that answers your question, gives you an option as an additional restorative, a more economical version. The resin, either prepared in your clinic or in the lab, would be one more option. Dr. Suteja Swami is asking, how do we retrieve or remove such crowns if by any chance they need further treatment in the future?
What's her name? Dr. Rutuja.
Suteja.
Yeah. Okay, so doctor, this is actually compared to a metal ceramic crown or a zirconia crown. This is so super easy. You're just going to, whatever you use for your tooth preparation or your crown preparation, any green band diamond is good enough. Like you would just prep a tooth, you just prep it, and it you can you it's bonded, right? So you have to cut it off. It won't come off like a crown comes off. So just take your green band diamond and just cut around it, and you'll be able to take it off easily and wash the tooth. That's all you need to do.
I think this question had come up when we were talking about endo crowns particularly.
Yeah, you just
So
trim it off. Like when you do a metal crown, how you actually have to cut through metal. Now, lithium disilicate, though it's such a fantastic material, it's also a softer material. So all you have to do is take your green band diamond and just cut it out. And even if it's in an internal chamber, just cut it out completely and you're sorted. You don't have to do anything else.
Great. So hope that answers your question, Dr. Swami. We also have Dr. Sonali asking us, are the pre-aesthetic temporaries bonded by the spot bond technique before depth cuts?
No, no. I don't like to spot bond or spot etch anything unless the patient is going to go back home and let people at home see it. Then I do like a spot etching and bonding. But very often, the undercuts in all your anterior teeth are enough to hold it by mechanical retention. You don't really need to spot etch and spot bond.
Because this is a unit, you give it as a unit together, right? Like all four joined together, right? Great. So hope that answers your question, Dr. Sonali. What I would also want to ask you, doctor, is that when we talk about lithium disilicate, one of the only limitations we see is strength. So when it comes to more extensive restoration other than single crowns, what do you suggest in that case, or is there a better, more stronger version of lithium disilicate that you would recommend
Strength is not an issue at all. Strength,
for bridges?
no. So if you're doing so again, that's the reason your lab has to be a good lab, because if you're doing a,
Yeah,
then so everything that's, if you're doing something in lithium disilicate, then the whole unit is held together by something called connectors. If those
correct.
connectors are not strong enough, then the bridge is going to break. If those connectors are strong, and this is something your lab is going to tell you after they evaluate your model. If the lab tells you, okay,
Right.
doctor, you don't have the place for a connector and the connector is very weak, then you change your protocol, and then you probably, that's the only time I would want to kind of do zirconia, because
Right.
zirconia in its thinnest form is super strong, or I would want to do metal ceramic. Those are the only times I change. When my lab reverts back to me saying that, doctor, I don't have space for a connector, this bridge is not going to hold, then you change to something that is I mean, then you can do like an overlay in zirconia also. You can do, what we do normally is we do like overlay preparations and we do a clean with zirconia bridge, which just holds just as well.
Got it. So connector design and I think the occlusal clearance or space would be the critical factor to be able to choose between lithium disilicate for most cases and maybe zirconia or metal ceramic for certain cases when we're talking about indirect versus direct or bonded versus cemented rather.
I must tell you that there are times when connectors for zirconia also can be very weak. At
Yeah.
those times, metal ceramic is your only choice. So zirconia, a lot of people have been pushing zirconia like there's nothing better than zirconia in the world, but that's not true, because zirconia has its own set of disadvantages and I mean a huge set of disadvantages and everything else. So zirconia is not the, you know, the end all and be all of cosmetic dentistry. Zirconia is actually should be used in very measured ways in very specific conditions only.
I agree fully because even as a prosthodontist, I see this rampant wave of using zirconia all the time, which I feel is causing us more harm than good in the long term. So using zirconia judiciously is a big word of caution that we don't say often enough, but we should. I also have another question by Dr. Shreya Bala. And she says how she's thanking us for a wonderful session. And she's also asking, how do we temporize for an onlay or tabletops?
Oh, that's very easy. So thanks, Shreya, for the feedback. Temporization, again, when you're doing onlays or whatever. So one, if you're following immediate dental sealing, your teeth are not going to be sensitive any which ways. But when you are temporizing, what you need to do is just take you one, you can do an initial impression and just do a repeat, but that's expensive because you're doing an impression, then you're doing a temporization, so that just becomes expensive. If
Right.
you want to do it in a really inexpensive way, then the best way to do it is to take a ball of composite and put first in your preparation, put some Teflon so it acts like a separating media. Take a ball of composite and lock it in. And remember, you have onlays, yeah, so you still have a bulge of the tooth. So just lock your composite into the bulge of the tooth and cure it. So that's like a mechanical interlock. Once you have a mechanical interlock, it's never going to come out.
Okay. And this is Teflon on the adjacent teeth.
No, Teflon inside that tooth, because see, we're talking about immediate dental sealing, which means you're actually etching and bonding the tooth. You
Yeah.
don't have temporary composite sticking to the internal structure of the tooth, because then you've lost your impression surface. So what you need to do is just put a on your prepared surface, put a layer of Teflon and then do your temporization. So your temporary doesn't stick to the internal.
Got it. It's like a separating media, and then you peel off and then bond.
Correct.
Perfect, perfect. So that's a great technique, and I think we saw the Teflon in some of your pictures earlier. So I think even protecting your preparation or all of that, like Teflon would work really well. So Dr. Shreya, hope that has answered your question. We have some great reviews coming in. Dr. Mansi is saying thank you for this informative session. Dr. Suteja has also said that this is such a productive lecture, and she's looking forward to learn more. So guys, if you all have any more questions, even Dr. Sonali is thanking us for this lovely session. So I think overall, Doctor, everyone has appreciated the time, energy, and effort that you put into this today. And the lecture has been very clinically oriented and very useful. So I'm sure come Monday morning, a lot of people are shifting their outlook on bonded dentistry. So I'm so grateful that you could spare the time with us, and we definitely look forward to staying connected with Dr. Shell in the multitude of courses that she's doing on various topics. So you guys know where to contact her, and of course we'll put up the links as well for you. And anyone who's missed this session, we'd be happy to share a recording with you to ensure that you continue this learning process. And thank you so much for being here with us today, Dr. Shell.
Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. And our next session is happening on the 31st of August. And this one is a unique session where we talk about the pearls of communication with Dr. Shilpa Chitnis. So I do hope all of you register for that. And if you all haven't already become part of the Widen WhatsApp group, then please make sure that you join that. You will receive an email with the link for the WhatsApp group as well as the recording for this session. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And thanks for the lovely feedback. And thank you once again, Dr. Shell, for being with us.
Thanks.
Look forward to staying connected.
Have a great day.
Thank you.